I'm, oops, wait. I just wanted to say that I am working, one of my projects, I'm working on a book about using some of the dog training and horse training techniques in helping overeaters learn how to train themselves to eat more naturally, mindfully, sensually. But it's using the same ideas about paying attention to reality, what's really going on in your body with your food. It's about being more conscious. It's an extension of mindful eating, but blah, 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 blah. That's in the pot. I'm working on it. Who knows if I'll ever finish.
Great.
Yeah.
That's great. So let's talk about Joe. Who wants to start?
Shall I, Ron?
You were there before me, I think, weren't you?
Yeah. Joe Pursch, I think, was from Yugoslavia. He had kind of a European, Eastern European accent, but a flavor about him that was very
Croatian, yeah, Croatian.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So
But it was Yugoslavia, but they're very tribal over there.
Okay, well, I'm old school, I guess. Anyway, he was very intelligent and had an impish kind of sense of humor. He would just drop these little extra sayings that would get your attention. Two things I want to tell about him. One is that he so respected alcoholics and so respected what we could bring to the table in terms of 12-step knowledge through experience, not through theory, and he always introduced himself as we would go around and say, I'm an alcohol abuser, or, he would say, I am an alcohol abuser. He said, my job is I pick the brains of these people and then I spout it out of my mouth and get my credit, but he would always say, I'm taking what I'm learning from you guys. And it inspired a lot of confidence in us. I am so grateful for all of my mentors and the confidence they gave me to just trust my instincts, sponsors as well. But I just want to tell one story. I've told Ron many times, I've even written it up, but we had the VDs, the visiting doctors would come every couple of weeks and they would sit in on our groups and they would be like a patient, but they'd also get to make rounds and go listen to all Joe's words of wisdom. So we were making rounds one morning and, walking the halls and going to see different patients. And we came upon the front desk where the ensign guards the door of coming into the unit. And the guy was at the desk and he was just petrified. And he said, Captain, to Joe. He stopped us all. He said, what do I do? What do I do? He said, the president's on the line, and for this guy, of course, the president was his commander in chief. I believe it was probably Nixon. And we had a senator in treatment and he wants to speak to the senator. What do I do? What do I say? And Joe always turned it on us to know what we knew, and he had taught us that routine patients do well. We treated a lot of dignitaries there. We treated princes from Saudi Arabia, all hush hush. We treated the first lady. And Joe always said, trust your instincts and routine patients do well. So he said to the ensign, well, as we know, routine patients do well. So how about handling this call like any other? What is your usual and customary? So the guy just calmed down and he thought a minute. He put back on his headset and he said to the caller, he said, I'm sorry, sir, our patients don't take phone calls. And there was a click at the other end of the line. Now, for me, that was Joe Pursch, and those were the good old days of treatment. Our patients didn't come in with cell phones and television sets and mani-pedi appointments. No, 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 no. They came in and they surrendered to routine patients do well. You are not a big shot here. You're not a doctor, lawyer, or Indian chief. All of those labels and all of that identity pass. We want to get down to a real human level, and you got to pay attention and listen to how we want to help you, including the first lady who had to make her bed every morning, who didn't like that idea. But Joe enforced that stuff. And that's the hard part of treatment. I always had counselors telling me, I wish I could be the easy counselor that everybody loves. But Ruth used to say, I have to do the dirty work. I'm the enforcer, and people don't always like me, but they get better. So anyway, that's my greatest memory of Joe Pursch, is inspiration and trusting humanity and having fun. We all had fun on that unit.
Can you describe some specifics about the hospital, about the early days, what the world looked like when you were there?
I started out with the Navy when I was still in graduate school. I was going for my master's, and it was a 2-year master's where we had internships. And my first internship was with Vernell Fox at Long Beach Memorial Hospital. She had a big program going on. And I think she was a friend of Marty Mann, the first woman in AA. So from there, I had already trained in psychodrama with Zerka Moreno and Lou Yablonsky, and I loved psychodrama. And I heard about this captain over at the Navy who was doing psychodrama with gigantic audiences, like 300 sailors in a Quonset hut down in the Long Beach port. And I went down there, and this was the doctor who came in after Joe Zuska. Joe Zuska was the first guy who created the Navy's programs, as far as I know. Joe, I think, was still over in Europe. I'm not sure.
He's in Naples, yeah.
Okay, in Naples, all right.
He actually had been the first one to start an alcohol treatment program out of the United States. I think they were the only two. It was Joe, and Joe started it because he was a flight officer on an aircraft carrier, and every problem he had happened in port when the sailors went out and got drunk. He saw that here was 4,000 people who did great at sea, but by the time they got to port, 3,000 of them got into difficulty and weren't effective when they got back. And Joe started, I think without anybody's permission, as he was wont to do, started a program. Said, no, we got an alcohol program. And I believe that was in Naples, either Naples or Gaeta, but I'm almost sure it was Naples Hospital.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure of the dates here, but I know that Joe Zuska was handling the program at the hospital, which was in Carson, California. And we were down in these Quonset huts in the port. And I went every week and studied psychodrama and really got turned on to all the excitement and enthusiasm that was being generated in these programs, and people were having fun. Now, I had come from, even before graduate school, I worked in New York City for the Phoenix House programs when they were first starting out. And if you want, I'll go into some of that, but it informs all of my feeling about needing group versus individual therapy, and also the idea of community and investment, and asking the patient to do something, not just think about something, have a task, accomplish it, feel good about that, get on to the next one, action, action, action. But anyway, so in terms of what the world was like, there weren't a lot of people having alcohol treatment programs that I knew of. It was Vernell Fox in Long Beach, at least this was Southern California, and it was the Navy. And I was so privileged to start there. And then they eventually hired me to run groups and do assertiveness training workshops and whatever else I did there.
And you might add that the reason the Navy had program and had a good one is because of the Forrestal fire. I think we talked about that. There was an aircraft carrier in the Gulf of Tonkin launching planes to bomb Hanoi, and a 500, actually a Sidewinder missile went off, and they nearly lost the carrier. And they screened the deck, and 35% were positive for alcohol or drugs or opiates. And at that point in time, the chief of naval operations said, "You guys get a program." And we didn't have a program other than what Zuzka had started down in the officers' room at Naval Station, because Dick Jewell had carried that message to him, said, "What are you doing about alcohol?" And Joe Zuzka's brother had died the week before of alcoholism. And so he was receptive. The number of things that came together were astonishing. And I think Joe was still chief of surgery, and then they moved from the Quonset huts when Joe Pursch came and to the hospital. I think that was the order of business.
Yeah. Wow. I love what you just said. There's so much zoomy stuff in all of this. It all came together at the right time. I mean,
the story is that Dick Jewell, he was a commander and had ruined his career with his alcoholism, but after he got out, he got sober in AA. And he saw that half of the sailors he'd ever gone to sea with had alcoholism. And he saw that they could do something. And that's why he went down and told Joe, and Joe said, "Well, we don't have a program. We don't know what to do." And Dick Jewell said, "Well, I do." And
that's right. I know Dick Jewell.
They started the first AA meeting in the officers' wardroom in Long Beach, and then that percolated to the Quonset huts, and Quonset huts to the Naval Hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joe was different. Joe had been a prisoner of war, German prisoner of war as a 16-year-old twice. He'd escaped once by getting on, made him the bazooka, head of the bazooka team that was going to go out and hit the first American tank. And Joe gets on his bicycle and realizes that he could keep riding instead of getting into war. And he escaped that time, and then he got captured again. But Joe had a way of walking in. It was uncanny the way he could read environments and people and solutions and difficulty. And I think that was in large part because of his war experience. He didn't have a dime's worth of PTSD. It just wasn't Joe. But he did have a sense of autonomy and agency because he had escaped and he had survived and gotten to Chicago, not speaking English, and the whole story with him. There's a couple of other stories about him that I remember. I remember we were standing before an elevator once, and I was he was a captain and I was a lieutenant commander, and the captain was a big deal if you were out of DC. And the elevator opened and the guy was cleaning the elevator, and he said, "Oh, make way for the captain." The captain, and Joe said, "No," he said, "you're more important than we are right now. You clean the elevator." And Joe had a way of seeing people's importance, seeing that he was just part of a great scheme of things. And he taught me that. He taught me really to see everybody's part, and that nothing was more important than having a clean elevator at his hospital that time. And certainly we could wait for the next elevator, but the guy, he just, the most interesting, well, there's a couple of other, I'll let Judi talk some more, but there's a couple of other stories I want to tell about him. So. Do you have any?
Well, no, I don't. I know I always felt slightly afraid of him and intimidated by him. I know he respected me. He really valued me and my work. But whenever I was around him, there was a sense of danger. that he could see right through you, you know, and that he knew more that was going on than I did, right? And today I seek out those kind of people in my life that keep me a little on edge, you know, kind of like the better tennis player,
Yeah.
you know. But then I was a graduate student and I kind of thought I was real smart and blah, blah. But he scared me. I kept a very low profile around him. We worked together years later at Western Institute and at some other places where it was kind of a moonlighting after the day. We'd do family groups at night with these other families. And he remembered me as always having my bowl of salad at staffings because I was obese and I was always on a diet. And that's another story that maybe we'll get into in terms of my my experience or not. But he was always watching. I mean, he knew every detail about what you were doing. And I thought, man, this man has such a big brain and he's so important, but he pays attention to who he's with. And you know, they say that about a lot of great men, about a lot of politicians, that they make you feel like you're the only person in the room. Yeah.
He had, when we admitted Billy Carter to the program, were you there then?
No, I was not.
Yeah. Joe went back to the White House to take a family history because the Carter family is riddled with Protestantism and fundamentalism and alcoholism, which always go together. But he took a history, and he really wanted to meet the president and stay in the Lincoln bedroom, both of which he got to do. And he came back to Long Beach, and I was very excited. I said, Captain, I said, tell me about the president. Tell me what it was like. He said, he was wonderful. He said, I got a good family history. He said, the president's wonderful. He's honest, he's meticulous, and he's far too decent to be president of the United States.
Wow.
This was before the Panama Canal was given away and some other things that happened, which Joe could see was going to happen by interviewing him. And you know, you need somebody with a little more sociopathology as president than Carter had, and Joe saw that. That's he made that very clear. The other story that taught me, because I ended up, Joe taught me how to take care of VIPs, and more than anybody else. And I was, you know, on the Hill for 20 years. When we admitted Betty Ford, now, were you there then?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And Bob Brown, I think it's Bob Brown, I've forgotten who Ford's president's EA was, but he was a Marine Corps.
Mike Brubaker, I believe, was Betty's counselor.
But the president's aide.
I'm sorry.
He came to ask Joe to move Betty to Palm Springs and have Muriel Zink and some of the other
My sponsor.
Yeah.
Okay.
To bring the meetings to her house so that it could be a little more anonymous. And Joe, and I was sitting in there, and Joe said, Mr. President, you're thinking about running for office in the fall. He said, you can do that if your wife's sober. Not do that if she's like she was when she narrated the Bolshoi Ballet, when she was so toxic. And the president said, very well, she stays here then. And we walked out, and I said, Captain, if I'm not mistaken, you just told the most powerful man in the Western world he couldn't do his job unless he did it your way. And Joe laughed a little bit and squinted those eyes, and he said, those are big chips, son. Those are big chips. And that's all he said, you know. But he said, no, I know more about this than he does. And he knows that I know more about it than he does. That's why she's here. And he said, you must always give your professional opinion. And he didn't, you're quite right, Judy. He didn't, one of my fondest memories is Betty washing the vans on Thursday and seeing that Betty, you know, washing the vans, because we're not talking out of turn because all of this is in her book, basically. But he was a master. He was really a master of standing his ground, of reading the environment, of reading people, and seeing what motivated people, and using that for sobriety. And he was the best I've ever seen.
Yeah. Well, I had started with some of that kind of training back at Phoenix House, you know, which was started. Shall I go to that a little bit, or is it off the subject?
No, go.
Okay. Well, you know, Phoenix House was started by what they called splittees from Synanon. Synanon is where Chuck Dieterich had tried AA, but he decided no, addicts had to just live in their own community and never be out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So he created this kind of empire for himself that really turned bad in years. But anyway, so way back then, I guess it was 1969, I was working for New York's Mayor Lindsay's Addiction Services Agency, and we helped start the Phoenix House programs. And the idea there was that there was no hierarchy of who was better than anybody else. That when we had our encounter groups at night, that the lowliest first person who came in the door could drop a slip on the house director. Drop a slip meant I put a piece of paper in a box that meant I wanted to be in your group because I needed to confront you about something. And everybody was equal. And I loved that concept. I just loved it. And that everybody had wisdom to give to somebody else, that you listened. You did not, you know, you didn't have to buy it, but you had to listen and be part of a community. And that's what I then got reinforced going to the Navy, and people like Joe who had that same idea that, why, of course we want to hear from you and we want you to listen to us. And it was a very egalitarian situation. And then I carried that, you know, when, you know, for overeating, I treated a lot of starlets and movie star people and all these kind of celebs. And I was able to carry that same energy in dealing with them, that you're no different. And of course, you know, alcoholism is the great leveler. So you're no different than anybody else, that we can all be subject to these things, and we all have a similar way out.
What was stigma like? Can you guys talk about, yeah, Judi, start, but to tell us about the early days of stigma.
Oh, what was stigma?
Yeah.
Is that what you asked?
Yeah,
Oh.
back in those days.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there was no such thing as people going on television and saying I'm an alcoholic and, oh, none of this stuff. It was very secretive. And, you know, that's why it's still called anonymous, right? For some reason. I mean, you know, I know Ron has no qualms about his anonymity, and neither do I. I want to celebrate to the world that I have faced my demons and trying to live differently. But in those days, of course, it was all those images of the down and out drunk. And, you know, I was married to an alcoholic. He was worked for Pan Am, and twice he was put to EAP programs, and it didn't work in his case. But, you know, with people like Joan McRae, we started getting employers involved in the EAP movement to take all that training that Ron talked about and rehabilitate people, turn it around instead of just the judgment. And even Judge Emerson out in Lakewood was the first judge ever that started kind of sentencing people to AA. Instead of going to jail, you're going to get a court card, and you'll come back in a couple months here and show me all the meetings you went to. Oh my God, that was unheard of. That was such a big deal. We were like dancing in the streets when that came out.
It was the evolution to drug courts, really. That was the first strike for it, really.
Yeah.
Now that's grown and become terribly, very successful throughout the country.
Yeah, and right now I'm feeling tearful just remembering it. I mean, we were really so celebrating when that began, because it was the start of talking about rehabilitation instead of being punitive toward the alcoholic. It was a very big deal. And yeah,
And I think the Navy was motivated, and part of the great success, and part of Joe could get all the money he wanted. I remember when budget was tight, he wanted 8 new vans, and they were there the next week. But one of the reasons was that an aviator, by the time he's gone through training in Pensacola and then the jet stream in Jacksonville and then on to Beeville in Texas, they've got about $1.5 million into him. And of the aviators, about 20% of them get exposed to enough alcohol, at least so the gene is expressed. And these guys were getting sober. So the Navy was getting a $1.5 million equipment returned to them. And economically, it made great sense. And that's just one MOS, that's just one occupational, but also you electronic technicians, sonar technicians, you can go down the line. They've got a lot of money in all these people. And to see, we had a 70, 80% recovery rate. And if you got a piece of equipment with a 70 to 80% recovery rate back into duty, it makes sense for economically and emotionally. And for a while, Judi, it was practically a professional advantage. It was for me to be in recovery.
really.
Yeah, it opened doors for me. It's particularly when I came back on active duty. The stigma got a little worse depending on the Secretary of the Navy at the time. But I think the Navy communicated the joy of recovery and that your life got better, and the Navy loved you when you were in recovery. They didn't look down on you. They said, God, this is a drunken sailor we've known what to do with, and he's sober and he's contributing. And
Yeah.
the evidence for that was very powerful.
Right. And, I think remembering back to Phoenix House, I had learned that we can turn around all our wily street ways that helped us survive, all our con man, all of that could be turned around and put to the positive, and you could go anywhere and do anything. And then we came up, we started seeing that we people in recovery are like superhuman in a way. I mean, we really invest in our potential and keep on trudging. We have perseverance, and we have such a support system. I was on a call last night where a guy was talking about in acting, that all the people on the set, he said the people in recovery are so different from some of the whiny babies. He said they're curious. They want to take direction from the director. They want to learn and do best for the project of the film, not just for their own ego.
Mm-hmm.
These are things that, man, if our whole society could move into this place, it's beautiful.
Richard Jewell, yeah.
Let's hear about him.
Dick was cashiered out. He was a line commander, which is a Black Shoe Navy destroyer guy. But his alcoholism really got him thrown out of the Navy, and he got into the AA groups in Long Beach and got sober. And like many people in early recovery, they don't know the limits of recovery. And he said, listen, I'm going to tell the Navy how to do this. And I think Dick was probably less than a year. I know I was less than a year sober when I came back to be the executive officer with Joe. And I know how fragile and how little we know then, but Dick didn't know he couldn't do it. So he went down there and told the Navy, look, I got a program I know what to do with the drunken sailor. Let me have a meeting here and show me a place and I'll show you. And Zeus, because he had lost his brother to alcoholism, was open-minded and glad to see him and said, look, you can have the officers' wardroom and start your meeting.
I remember him just being such a great jokester. He had a terrific sense of humor, and he was
Yeah.
always making everybody laugh. And we always had a good time when Dick was around. But you just reminded me of something about, we used to take them in the vans down on Thursday nights to a big meeting in Long Beach on 7th Street in Long Beach. And hundreds of people were at this meeting, and it was really high energy and always laughing. And it reminded me that the importance of taking people out to meetings. When I had my eating disorder units, administrators would say, that's a lot of expense. We got another van. We got to have a nurse in the thing. Blah, 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 blah. Let's just invite AA people in to talk to our folks, right? An H&I panel, okay? And I said, that's great, but it's not the same. They have to be out in the community seeing that a guy comes in after work and comes to this meeting, or a guy goes to a meeting before breakfast. That people, this is that whole Phoenix House idea and Synanon. Do you have to pull them away from society or show that we live this life in society? Our AA is a training ground to take stuff back to the community. So anyway,
No, that's profound. And one of the things that was happening in Southern California that stunned the Navy was our recovery rate with young Marines from 18 to 25, which was unheard of. I mean, most of them were getting sober, which is almost unheard of. But the reason they were going was there were pretty girls at that Thursday night meeting. They could see a scene out there. Anybody can stay sober in a damn hospital. But to go out there to get a date with that girl, you had to stay sober. Because she was really trying, and all the models and actress wannabe in California, half of them are at meetings. And it's a tremendous scene. It's a tremendous social scene. And still, that big meeting up in the Pacific group, it's still, it's an in crowd. That's the in crowd in LA.
Yeah.
The Pacific group.
Yeah, I'm glad you reminded me, because I was one of those girls who was going there to see all those gorgeous sailors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nothing changes.
Oh, well, whatever it takes, right?
Whatever it takes.
Right.
We talked a bit about from going from the Quonset huts to the hospital.
There was a tremendous resistance from the hospital to putting those drunks up there on the, was it 6th floor, Judy, or the 5th floor? I've forgotten.
I thought it was 5, yeah.
The 5, yeah. But there was a tremendous resistance. And then we got up there, and then the hospital kind of got used to us and used to us going down to the cafeteria. And one of the things that happened, and it's in Betty Ford's book, The Times of My Life, was when she was admitted. Joe took her, escorted her down to her room, and put her in this is going to be your room. And there was a 4-bed room, three other women. And Ms. Ford turned to Captain Pursch and said, Dr. Pursch, I haven't been in a room with any other people as roommates since I was 5 or 6. And Joe turned to her and he said, very well, Mrs. Ford, if you insist, I'll ask these other women to leave. And she said, of course, I can't do that. No, I'm here. So the Betty Ford Center still has a 4-bed room, I understand, for women. It was essentially modeled where initially the Betty Ford Center, they were making their beds, they were having field day, they were washing the vans. I'm not sure what that's evolved to. That's probably HIPAA and the hospitals have made that unfair to make alcoholic patients wash vans. But initially, that's the way it was. They took care of field day, they cleaned up things, they made their beds, and she liked that. And she really jumped into it and liked it. I mean,
And, there was also a time, I think, that we were very overcrowded, but that the counselors the counseling group would happen right in a patient room. is they would set up a circle of chairs. And so right in the midst of where you sleep, you're also getting your recovery. There was no sense of there be a separation between recovery and your life. You know, it happened where you slept, it happened where you ate, it was 24/7, it was fabulous. Oh God, I just thought of something that you reminded me. What? Oh, let me just tell you a really zooby thing about the intervention with Mrs. Ford. And that was that, you know, we were planning that she needed an intervention, right? And Joe was deciding who to send to really do that. Well, he had a nurse named Pat Benedict. Ron, did you ever meet her?
I knew Pat very well.
Oh, okay. Then you might know this even better than I, but I'll just tell you as I knew it, is that Pat Benedict had had breast surgery.
Mastectomy, right?
Right?
And
so Joe said, we'll send Pat because she'll not only identify as an alcoholic, in those days, even breast surgery was kept secret.
Yeah.
You didn't tell, right? So here Pat could share with her the breast surgery, cancer, and alcoholism. And what an effective intervention it turned out to be. So tell me more. I don't remember more about.
Well, yeah, she was the first one to really say, I have breast cancer and I've had a mastectomy too. It was done at Bethesda. And so she was, you know, she was out there. She said, this is, I don't know if you remember the statement she released when she said she was in Long Beach for alcohol treatment. And it was very clear and very bold. And she was, I love that about her.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Betty Ford Center was established. And to my understanding, it came out of the program in Long Beach Hospital. Am I wrong?
The model for it, the motivation, I think, was from the Annenbergs and some of the Palm Springs people who had the money behind it. But also Betty Ford in treatment. Several people said that you'll be able to change the world if you get sober. One of whom was Pursch, and he was just very candid. And that, I think, was really kind of the seed of it, that there would be a center and it would be like Long Beach. And I don't know who said, well, we'll name it after you, but obviously that name recognition and her modest affirmation and honest acceptance of the disease was powerful. And when that was opened and she got sober, I was at her first meeting. It was actually in Garden Grove, if you ever went to that meeting. And remember when she stood up and said, I'm Betty and I'm an alcoholic. And you could see the whole world change. Every alcoholic in that moment took a step forward. And at some level said, well, if she can have it, I might have it too.
Right.
She can get sober. I might be able to get sober too.
I don't know about the politics or the machinations of establishing the Betty Ford Center, but I know Joe Cruz was the doctor brought in. I don't know why someone else was.
One that Susan and went to Joe and said, Mama's got a problem. She was the one that blew the whistle on Mama. And Joe is the one that arranged, he called Pursch then. And then the intervention.
I see.
Wheels started going.
Huh. Okay. So then Joe eventually married Sharon Wegscheider.
Yeah.
And she gave a wonderful chalk talk. And by the way, Joe also made a lot of chalk talk films, great lectures. But she made a thing about the family system of alcoholism, which of course I soaked up. But she talked about, the mobile of all of us being kind of loosely hung together. And if you clicked, ding, one little piece, the rest would have to have reverberations. So she created, along with Claudia Black was later, even later than my family stuff, but she created the idea that we had to treat the whole family. And actually that idea came around in the 1940s with schizophrenic patients. Doctors discharged schizophrenics and they were doing great in the hospital. They'd go home and they go back to old behavior. And they said, there's something back there in the home that's motivating this kind of acting out. So they'd call in the family just to consult, and they'd find, man, this whole system is locked in and we have to chip away at this. And of course, now we have beautiful, you know, family therapy has still fallen by the wayside, in my opinion. You know, having families in for a one-day education session is not the same as some ongoing help for all of us to move on to the road of recovery.
And that was the strength of the Navy program too. They flew the wife or the spouse out, and
Yeah.
they went through the program for 2 weeks,
Yes.
set in group, and there was no training. I think that was the first, I don't know, maybe. And then Paul Oliger started the program out, Dr. Paul, who wrote the most famous line, "Acceptance is the answer," was chief of that. There was a program out in towards San Bernardino that would treat the family, whether the alcoholic would come to treatment or not. And his numbers were astonishing. The number of recovery and the percentage of recovery was the same, because if you treat the enabler and the codependent system, the alcoholic can't keep drinking. And that was the first and only time I think that's happened. It will never happen again because of insurance companies.
Yeah, right. Well, we were doing it over in San Pedro, and we were doing it in Long Beach, and a lot of that was coming up. I did multiple family groups all day on Saturdays with Alan Berger. Alan and I grew up together and learned our craft together, and it's beautiful.
Looking back then to now, what have we lost that worked or was working that we had to lose? I heard Ron just say the word insurance companies. What is it exactly now? Where are we in the world of recovery from substance abuse of any kind, from where we were back in these heydays that you guys are now recalling with great men like Joe Pursch? And
well, I think Ron hit the nail on the head. It's about money.
Yeah.
You know, when it became a money-making proposition, and we understood that they needed to make money to keep us going, but decisions were made about wooing the client, making them feel more comfortable, you know, in not a positive way, in my opinion. And then, of course, drop family therapy. That's really too expensive. And drop taking them out to meetings. Let's bring the meetings into the hospital. That's too expensive. On and on. And then treatment programs became competitive with each other. You know, we'll give them a nicer facility. I remember Muriel was my sponsor, and I was starting one of the first halfway houses for overeaters. And I told her, I said, the furniture is so, you know, we don't have the money to buy new furniture. We're kind of like, you know, by cheek and jowl, making it through here. And Muriel said, you know, honey, if you're doing good treatment, nobody cares what the facility looks like. Nobody cares about all those comforts. They want you to see them and hear them, you know? And that was very helpful to me. It kept me going, you know, despite looking fancy. So now we have a lot of fancy places that cater to the whims of the patients, but we don't provide the kind of discipline or encouragement to take action that we once did. That's my opinion, although I'm out of the field because of those things. So maybe Ron knows more what's happening today.
Well, I think there was a heyday when Dr. Paul's program, that the insurance companies were paying for families to be admitted to the hospital and to be treated as codependent. That went by the wayside. I think as the cost of medical care went up in this country, the first thing that gets cut is mental health care and substance abuse. And insurance companies basically quit paying for it. If you had alcoholism, you had to write a check for treatment. Now, over 20 years, Patrick Kennedy and Jim Ramstad, and Senator Kennedy, it was Paul Wellstone. I was a medical consultant for a bill called the Wellstone bill for parity. We finally got that through as an add-on to the Troubled Asset Relief Fund that went through right at the end of the Bush administration, insurance companies are still resistant to pay for inpatient treatment and to treat alcoholism like another disease. My testimony's online in front of the country, in front of the Congress, but basically what I argued was the diseases of alcoholism and drug abuse are the most expensive diseases we have. A young Marine on a motorcycle that transects his C-cord and is paraplegic for 60 years, that's the most expensive disease you can have. Liver transplants from hepatitis C or HIV, all of which are drug and alcohol related. They're the dementia from alcohol. They're the most expensive disease. Sooner or later, the culture has to pick up the tab for it. And that was my argument. Why not do it on the front end? Because it's cheaper. That has finally, they begin to look at it a little bit. But that's been the hardest thing, is to get insurance to treat substance abuse and alcoholism like other diseases where they, you know, if you get admitted for a heart attack, they pick up 80% of the tab. That hasn't been true for substance abuse until the past year. It's gotten better, and it gets better and better. And Patrick Kennedy, to his everlasting credit, has done more to make that happen than anyone I know.
And let's not forget also the influence of big pharma, that all those drugs came around. I mean, in eating disorders, they thought that our problem was a Prozac deficiency, you know, just prescribe drugs, that'll be $1 a day and get them out of the hospital. And so they all melded together to hurt us.
Anything else? We've been on, believe it or not, we've been on 1 hour already.
That's
Boom.
Time flies.
Yeah.
fun.
You know, Ron, when we were together last week, you talked about the group of AA speakers that ended up coming into the Quonset huts. What role did they play?
We didn't know. I didn't know. But the first week I was in treatment, and I was in Judy's group when they asked me about my drinking. I wasn't drinking for 6 months, but I said I had alcoholism. I said, well, do you want to stay? I said, I really do, because everybody was having so much fun. And I had said six months of dry knuckle sobriety, which was the worst 6 months of my life. Long and short of it is, I think that, ask me again exactly.
All right, Ron, I just, you know, you said that these guys came in.
That was what was stunning. And I didn't know, but the first week I was there, I heard Father Joe Martin, the Chalk Talk, that the initial Chalk Talk was filmed by a Navy combat crew, because that's all we knew to do. And we'd heard about this priest. When the chief of naval operations said, get a program, we'd heard about this priest that gave a good talk. So we sent and made Chalk Talk. Chuck C., who was probably the most famous, Clancy Ismailin, who Sandy Beach. These are like, you know, the superstars of recovery. Then they would come and talk every noon, and there would be a different one. And I was enchanted. I was just delighted. They were funny, they were insightful, they were brilliant, and they were really talking about how to live life without. The drinking stories aren't so interesting, but these guys were in recovery, and they were dealing with it and showing you how to live life with joy and awe and wonder and delight and enchantment and humor, all of which, if we don't discover in recovery, I don't think we can unload our recovery. But these speakers that we had, and I didn't know that we were kind of in the Mecca of the greatest AA speakers, maybe in the country, since Bill W. and that crowd. Frank Honeycutt, I could go on. Chicago Jack, I've forgotten Joe Takamine, who was a physician who gave a great talk, who came down from Beverly Hills. But we had great speakers, and it was a contagion. It just, you know, recovery is contagious. And that's what happened there, I think.
You both cast a pretty huge shadow on this whole field. What would you like to see happen in your lifetime to improve things?
I'll just say a little. I attended a conference a couple weeks ago. They were talking about making revisions to the big book, which happens every so many years. And people are talking about trying to take a little bit of the God stuff out of things because it's keeping so many people from coming in. Spirituality, yes. God, maybe not. For my purposes, I think it'd be nice to spend a little more time in ongoing workshops. Hazelden did them for a while. I don't know if they still are, but more about focusing on stage 2 recovery and focusing on keeping the old timers green, keeping it new rather than people who've been in the program a while, just kind of repeating the same stuff that they used to do when they drank and what they learned in early recovery, and not emulating and showing that we're in this constant lifelong process of doing this, and that it gets better and better to be a person who's growing and learning. It keeps you young, to keep that curiosity going about what the heck am I doing here? I'm concerned that I'm not criticizing the program at all. I'm just saying I'd like to see us expand into focusing on later stages of recovery, which could be motivating to the newcomer as well.
Could you you use the word stage 2 recovery? Can you define that for people?
Yes, well, there was a guy named Ernie Larson that wrote a couple books about stage 2 recovery. And I think this is some of the stuff that Alan's talking about, and that Bill Wilson was writing about at the end of his life. That, yeah, we got sober and we're having a good life, but there are deeper things to go for, and taking a look at my bigger picture, my magna self, let's say. And that's stage 2 is about, so what have you done for me lately? Is your sole purpose here to say, rah, here, look on my t-shirt, I'm a recovering alcoholic. That's good, that's great, yay, happy. But now what? Let's look at the next stage of your growth and development. What's it all about, Alfie? And maybe that I'm saying that because I'm a psychologist and I'm interested in these issues, but I think we lose some long timers who drop away because it sounds repetitive. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be that way.
Jude, are you talking about like what Bill, the new frontier, emotional sobriety? Isn't that what we're talking about?
Exactly. Yes. That's what the way Bill Wilson framed it and named it at the end of his life.
Right.
But Ernie Larson had written about this many years before.
Uh-huh.
And before that, Jung said that hidden in every addiction is part of the personality that needs to come out in recovery. He called it the archetype.
Right.
I didn't want to be a psychiatrist, psychoanalyst. When I was in medical school, people who couldn't do anything else became psychiatrists. And people who couldn't do psychiatry became psychoanalysts. So I don't need to tell you what I am. I was a critical care doc, and I loved it. I never had a bad moment in an ICU or an ER. But what I was I love storytelling to create meaning in life.
Meaning.
And that to me is what psychiatry is. That's what recovery is. We get together for an hour and tell stories to one another, hold hands, hug each other, and go home. And I'm not sure it's a lot more complicated than that. But we have to find, I think, in recovery, that part of our personality that has been repressed and have that expressed to live the fullness of life, because each of us has a gift to give. If we're waiting on the meaning truck, like the ice cream truck, to come by the house and go, ding, ding, here's meaning in your life, it isn't going to happen. We have to find it. And that's the joy of recovery. I think that's the process of stage 2, really, is finding out where our judo punch is, what specific gift that we have to give. But what you and Genevieve are doing, you're trying to give something that'll hang around for a while. You don't have to do this, but the joy of y'all doing it is just contagious. I see your interest in it, and it's beautiful. And not most people go to a job that they don't like every day.
Yeah.
But the people that get into recovery and stay in recovery and live happy, joyous, and free and experience those emotions we talked about do find out their gift for the world and want to live the world a little better, leave the campground a little neater than when we found it.
And I just want to add on to that, you know, we use that term terminal uniqueness, and we kind of make fun, like, you're not so unique, you're just like every other alcoholic and all that. But no, we are each terminally unique, and it's to find,
Well said.
and that's what we need to be celebrating more in recovery, is that it's all of our paths are, you know, circular and up and down and whatever, but we each have a unique gift to give here. And to encourage that from day one in the recovering alcoholic, and not just to march in lockstep, because that's another reason people drop away, is they say, oh, it's a cult, it's getting me too many slogans, you know. It's to encourage you to find your dark side and your light side, your glory.
Can we do this again sometime?
Yeah. Yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you.
I have one question. It could be to both of you. What do you think it is that happens to, I like to think of them as long timers, but they have a lot of years, but not enough days, that they're not willing to grow? What is it that happens that they decide that they're going to just coast, or, you know what I mean? And
Well,
not grow?
this is my first off the top answer, but you know, I never was into fellowship in the program, because I knew how to do the tap dancing out there in the world. And I wanted to just come into my programs and sit quietly and be a little fly on the wall and absorb. And I'm glad that that's happened for me for so many years. So I haven't been here about wanting to win friends and influence people. And in answer to your question, I'm afraid that there's too much emphasis on that. Like the old timer who stops growing is because they found a dance that works. They get applause for the same spiel. And they're afraid to say, oh, but now I'm struggling. Now I'm having a bad day. Now I don't know my direction. They're afraid to say that. But that's a part of what we're doing here.
Yeah, there's nothing more powerful than someone who appears all buttoned up to let it all hang out.
Yeah, you know, I stopped doing a lot of workshops and television because I found myself saying the same old thing. You know, I watched myself phoning it in. And if it's not new and exciting to me, it's not going to go across. And I said, I got to pull back from this for some, you know.
The factor that I think is the most dangerous to alcoholics in recovery, and maybe the most dangerous to the culture, is the over medication of the culture. We take more medicine than any culture in the world, and we've got good ones. And I've certainly used antidepressants in recovery. I'm not knocking medicine, but I think the first thing that we do, and alcoholics are as guilty as the rest of the culture, is if we feel bad, we go and get a pill to make us feel better. Now, an alcoholic who's going to meetings and in service work is perfect if they need medicine, because they'll keep you out of trouble and they'll make you look like a smart doctor. But if they're not going to meetings and they're sitting at home and want you to fix them so that they won't be depressed, you're doomed and they're doomed. And I think we over medicate the culture. It's uncomfortable to grow and uncomfortable. I know I was uncomfortable. I knew I was supposed to be doing something else. I don't know. And now, as I said, I was enjoying critical care medicine, but I knew I was supposed to, and I didn't know what it was. Well, if I'd have taken something to numb that urge to do something else, I wouldn't have gone through the aggravation and economic cost and the rest of it to become a storyteller. But I think we get stuck largely because of medication in this culture. And I think we could use a lot less. Not that we don't have good medicine, and sometimes we probably aren't using enough. But by and large, particularly those of us that are in the program are vulnerable to wanting a pill to fix it. That's the way we got here.
Right.
I absolutely agree. And I just want to say, this is a pamphlet I wrote for Hazelden in 1986, Transferring Obsessions. I am now doing workshops and writing a whole book about that issue, because a lot of old timers just transfer to another addictive, self-destructive behavior, whether it be overeating or gambling or sexing or, shopping. And so we have to look at that turning point of not going to the next one, recycling. But eventually there's nothing you can eat, drink, buy, or kiss that's going to keep you from growing.
Can't you make shopping an exempt category?
No, sorry. That wouldn't be my first choice to exempt, by the way.
Yeah, the problem is you can live without shopping, you can't live without food, right, Jude?
That's true. And you have to have a new relationship with your substance. That's what makes it graduate school, baby.
Give you each a chance to sum up about Dr. Pursch.
I think it'd be important at the end of your film to maybe list all of his credits in terms of the films he's made and that sort of thing, if that's possible. As well as for all of us, for Ron and for me and for everybody. I mean, we've also produced in the field, we haven't just talked about it. And these are ongoing gifts.
Where would I start looking?
I'm sorry, maybe his kids know.
Well, you can Google Joe Pursch on YouTube and see a couple of them.
Okay.
Okay.
The best one that he made was the character defects in recovery, which is personality disorders. It's terrific, but there's a couple of them on YouTube.
Thank you, Ron. Yeah.
Ron?
Well, he was certainly my psychological and professional sober father, and I made a decision to become a psychiatrist largely because I hung out with him for a year and saw the way he helped and loved and moved in the universe with a delight and a humor and a lightness, yet a profound seriousness and awareness of what needed to be done and willing to carry through. And they don't come along that often, or they haven't in my life. There have been probably 4 or 5 people that when I do a workshop up in Michigan for people in recovery, we write down the 5 people that influenced us the most, and he and Thomas Merton and James Forrestal, and I've got, everybody's got their own list, but that's important. Joe would be at the top of it for me.